Welcome to Creepin' It Real. I am Judah. Let's talk about the 1997 Italian horror film known as Wax Mask. When I first started watching this, I was convinced that it was like a 60s, 70s film. But then some practical effects came in and I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely a 90s movie. The practical effects, not practical effects, the special effects, which were computer generated for sure, were so 90s, it was unbelievable. Now, I would call this a trope-trocity in one perspective. A lot of these movies based on wax museums have very little difference. A lot of them are just like, the main thing is you have this wax museum, people come in, they're like, oh, it's so lifelike. And what? They're real people? Oh my gosh. You know, so there's not a lot of difference. Now, when I'm saying this, I'm kind of wondering, in general, I don't know what subgenre of horror movies probably suffers the worst from trope, but a contender for sure has to be all horror movies revolving around the Wax Museum. Now, granted, this movie does, like I said, trope-trocity, suffer a lot of that. But there was also some things that I didn't expect to see happen in this movie. And that was a nice surprise. Like, there is a twist at the end that I did not see coming. Not that it made the movie good, because it didn't. It just led to this kind of oh, that's some BS right there. But it was a twist for sure. And there are some weird things occur that just didn't totally make sense. One thing that I did kind of like, instead of it just being hey, we killed people and then dip them in wax, which seems to be the general line of things that deal with wax museums, there was a whole system of weird, brightly colored chemicals that got injected to people that like turned them into wax, which I thought was interesting compared to just the dipping these dead bodies and them being mummified in wax. Anyway, let's watch this trailer. I can't say that this is a fantastic movie. I'm going to come out and tell you right now that I'm just going to give it a 5 out of 10. I was entertained, but I could have lived my life without ever seeing this. Actually, just seeing that guy that was locking up that gate, that brings up some confusion. I'm not even sure, spoilers, by the way, I'm not even sure that character was real. You'd have to watch the movie to understand why I say that, but anyway.
I'm not sure that it was a good idea to work in the museum.
What kind of lunatic could be responsible for this?
One of the greatest scenes, it made me laugh so hard, is that hand right there. They show the scene where this hand gets ripped off this guy's arm. It is so funny. Oh my gosh, it is hilarious. He just grabs it and goes snap. He just snaps it right off. There was like no effort whatsoever. I'm glad, because if our body parts snapped off that easy, we'd be in a lot worse situation than we are right now. Because my golly, that hand just snapped right off. You know what? I don't know, man. Yeah, right there. There's some weird. It was just weird. Let's see if I can. That right there. See, he has this woman hooked up to this machine, and it like drains her, but then repumps her full of stuff. It was so confusing. I didn't know if they died or if they were kept alive, because there's some heavy hints that these wax figures were still alive. And it was a little frustrating to me that it wasn't fully explained. It was just kind of like, okay, well, we drain them of their blood, then pump them full of all this weird chemicals. They turn into wax, but they can still move their eyes, so we have to cover their eyes with fake eyes because people would see their eyes moving. And does that mean that what? I was super confused, very confused. Anyway, back to the trailer. Okay, there was also something in this movie. There was like a fetish with hearts, which was never really explained. At one point, I thought I understood. Let me take this off. So let me give you kind of a brief synopsis. It starts off with two people being murdered by some like shadowy figure with a claw hand that rips a dude's heart out. It was witnessed by a child. Then we jump to the future. This child is grown up and she gets a job at a wax museum. Now, what we come to find, I'm saying again, spoilers, okay? Spoilers. So if you want to see this movie, stop watching. What we come to find is that the owner of this wax museum, he was married to a woman and she cheats on him. He's busy, in his world of art. And she feels like she's neglected. So she finds another man. He comes home, finds her with this other man. They start fighting. Then this guy who should not be sleeping with this man's wife, they make him out to be the hero, and he pushes the artist into a big vat of wax, which they showed in that trailer. He becomes horribly disfigured and burned like down to the bone. Quite honestly, the amount of damage done to him that they kind of show is beyond survivable in my personal opinion. So then he seeks revenge and he finds his technically still his wife, because they just assume he's dead, and then they go off and her lover get married. And so he seeks them out and kills them and rips out their hearts. It makes sense to me from that aspect of there being some kind of imagery of how his heart was broken, and so he therefore was tearing out their hearts. That makes sense. But then there was another place where another heart was torn out, and I was like, okay, well now that thought doesn't quite make sense anymore. And so then I was like, so what is this weird fetish with hearts? I don't know. It maybe that's just something we shouldn't even think about. And there's a lot of stuff you shouldn't think about with this movie. I mentioned that I for sure thought it was filmed in the 60s or 70s, but then when those computer graphics came in, I was like, oh no, that is definitely a 90s thing. They are not spectacular. The practical effects are fun to watch, but when they start getting the CG stuff in there, it's really hideous. And at the end, a home is on fire. The fire in the house and on the building is just absurdly bad. Like I said, there's a few surprises within the subgenre of the wax museum horror area, but there's not much to it. Now, I was willing to give this movie a chance, and I could have almost given it a 6 out of 10, but it committed one of the worst special effects crimes that I have ever witnessed. There's this scene where there's a child at some kind of a park. There seems to be rides. There's cotton candy being sold. You can tell that he is not well off. He may even be an orphan living on the streets. And you can see he's pretty bummed because he can't participate. And then this shadowy figure appears and buys him a big thing of cotton candy and gives it to him. Now the kid's all happy and he's like, yay, this stranger just gave me some cotton candy. I'm going to hang out with this creepy person. And then this creepy person's like, hey, I just gave you some cotton candy. Want to get in this boat with me? And let's just paddle around. We'll have a good time. You know, me, this 40, 50, 60-year-old, who knows, who just randomly bought you cotton candy. I want to hang out with you. I have no ill will towards you whatsoever. And this stupid child's like, yeah, let's do it. We're best friends now because cotton candy. So they're out in the water paddling around, and they paddle to this little island in the middle of this lake that has some cool statues and so forth, a nice little garden on there. They get up there and they're looking around, and this kid's all like, yay, cotton candy, not gonna die today because I've got cotton candy. Then suddenly shadowy figure, would you believe it, turns on this child, grabs the cotton candy out of his hand and chucks it into the lake. Insult to injury, and then kills this kid. But where huge grievance I have with this, when he throws the cotton candy into the lake, then they cut back to him injecting this child with some serum. They cut back to the cotton candy floating in the lake. What kind of BS is this? We all know that as soon as that cotton candy hits that water, it just disappears. There is no floating on the lake for a minute. That cotton candy is gone. So that's my biggest gripe with this movie. I can forgive the hideous flames engulfing that building at the end. I can forgive the confusion in the story as to, are these people dead or are they alive? But I cannot forgive cotton candy floating on water. That is unforgivable. Let's check out IMDb. Oh, I did read that as far as the budget goes, what I read, now this is the thing, Wikipedia has information, but it's not always the best. It can be super confusing. It mentioned that through pre-sales for this movie, they got like $2 million. So if they were pre-sales and they got $2 million, but then it says at the box office it only made $250,000. But if they were pre-sales, then that means it already made back its money, and because that's what they used to produce the film. So how you get what I'm saying there? It's not like they went to a studio and the studio said, here's $2 million. Now go make this money back. And they only made back $250,000, which would mean that was a flop of a movie because they didn't come close to making back their money. But if you pre-sell almost like a Kickstarter, and these people are paying, like, here's my $150. I want to see you make this movie. They essentially made back all their money in advance. And that, I don't know, that doesn't totally jive for me back in 97, but I could be wrong. But let me read you some information about the making of this, revolving around the directors and so forth. It says here, after witnessing the poor state of Lucio Fulci. Now, as I mentioned in the past, I have a hard time with some of these Italian names, and I had to shout out to Holy Parish of Doom, who helped me with the pronunciation, and I cannot tell you that I am still pronouncing this guy's name correctly, but it says that he witnessed Lucio Fulci health in 1994. Dario Argento decided to help Fulci by working with him to develop a new project. The two eventually agreed upon a remake of House of Wax. Now, this is another, within the same Wikipedia article, there is differing information that is saying that it was not a remake of House of Wax. Pre-production lasted longer than expected, as Argento had been working on his own film. Fulci died in 1996, which led Argento having special effects artist Sergio Stiviletti enter to direct the film. Stiviletti changed the film's script to focus more on special effects, which is very obvious. Again, I'm not a huge follower of Lucio Fulci or Dario Argento, but from things I read, this movie felt lacking their fingerprint in the movie. And be it that Stiviletti, I know I'm butchering that dude's name, was a special effects artist, it makes sense that he would want to change the script to lean onto something that he felt more comfortable with. Now, let's go to IMDb. Let's see if anybody else, I'm giving it a 5. It looks like the average is 5.8, which is pretty close to a 6. That's a little better than an average movie. But let's check out what some people are saying. We got Film Guy 66. This has got to be one of the most boring films I've ever seen. Awful dubbing. Characters that you care nothing about. There really isn't much here to praise, though I did like the killer with his metal arm and nasty needle. It's a wonder what Fulci would have done with the film had he lived long enough. The script, though written by Fulci with work by Argento, is far from great. I had more fun doing my laundry than watching this movie. There are far better Italian horror films out there. Rent this one if only you're a diehard Fulci and Argento fan. Though they've both made much better films than this, I had high hopes after reading the reviews on IMDb, but now I'm let down. I don't know. Let's see if we got any 10s. We have a 10. Oh my gosh. Okay. We have a 10, but they wrote a book. So if you want to read that, check it out yourself. Okay. Here's one by Weirdling Wolf. A terrified young Persian girl, Sonia, witnesses the gruesome slaughter of her parents by a shadow-slaked, steel-handed horror. Later in adulthood, she fatefully finds work with eerily eccentric wax sculptor Boris, discovering that his macabre mannequins prove to be disturbingly lifelike. While the prosaic dubbing precludes any hope of acting nuance, Stiviletti's full-blooded, splendidly grisly gothic shocker remains a stylish, gore-glutted update of terror classic mystery of the Wax Museum. The grossly disfigured Volkov is a fascinatingly evil fiend, and his grim subterranean laboratory is sinisterly replete with a delicious, diabolical array of monstrous-looking machinery. Co-written by horror maestro Lucio Fulci, co-produced by Dario Argento, a frequently disparaged work, I feel that Stiviletti's gorgeously gothic chunk blower is overdue some love, dude. I don't know. I mean, if you're looking at a slate of work by a certain person that you greatly admire, and you feel that one film does not stack up to the rest, or is like by far not great compared to the rest, then I could see you being right and being able to point that out. Like, there are some bands that I love. There's a band, Project 86, and there was a certain stint of music that I really enjoyed. And then it just became clear that as the progression went on, I became less and less impressed by the albums. And by, I mean, that's how it is. So then as a what I would consider myself a huge fan of Project 86, then you would point to a certain album and I'd be like, oh yeah, that was not so great in comparison to another. But then you might have somebody who wasn't a huge fan of Project 86 to come in and listen to that album and they'd be like, you know what, it's really not that bad. I'm kind of from the outsider looking in, and I'm looking at this Wax Mask and I'm like, you know what? It really isn't that bad, but it definitely is not great. I'm not sure that I would be singing the praises here that Weirdling Wolf was, but I definitely wasn't that guy that was all like, this is boring. I had more fun folding my laundry. Nah, this is something that I did find entertaining, but I've watched it. It's out of my system and I will never visit it again. Guys, if you've watched this movie and you have thoughts, I want to hear your thoughts. If you have suggestions, give me your suggestions. If you believe that cotton candy floats on water, I would have to say there's no help for you. Hopefully there's somebody out there who can accept you for who you are. That's not me, but hopefully there's somebody out there that can accept you for who you are. Thanks for watching. I'm Judah. This has been Creepin' It Real. See you later.